stay with this slowly. This message is for those who have lived long enough to know that fear doesn't shout anymore. It whispers. God says, I see the worries you don't speak about, not the loud fears, the quiet ones, the ones that come when the house is finally silent. When you think about your children, your grandchildren, your home, your name, your legacy. God says, you have protected your family for many years. Through sacrifice, through silence, through choices no one ever thanked you for. And now you wonder, who will protect them when I'm tired? Who will protect them when I'm not strong like before? Listen carefully now. God says, I did not bring your family this far to leave them uncovered. The years you spent worrying were not wasted. They were preparation. But this season is different. Here is the first twist you were not expecting. God says, some of the fear you feel now is not danger. It is transition. You are stepping out of being the only shield. And that feels unfamiliar. But unfamiliar does not mean unsafe. Pause here. God says, I am protecting your family in ways you cannot physically do anymore. Places you cannot go. Situations you cannot control. Conversations you will never hear. My protection does not weaken with age. Now, listen closely, especially if you worry about the future of your children. God says, I'm watching over the decisions they make when you're not in the room. You taught them more than you realize. Your values are louder than your voice ever was. What you planted did not disappear. Another truth unfolds slowly. God says, your family will not collapse after you rest. Rest is not abandonment. Letting go is not failure. The shield does not depend on your constant effort anymore. Here comes the suspension. Stay with it. God says, some problems you feared for years will never arrive. Not because you prevented them, but because I removed them quietly. You will never know how close they came. Now hear this deeply personal truth. God says, you are allowed to stop carrying fear as proof of love. Love does not require constant anxiety. Care does not demand sleepless nights. You have already proven your devotion. Another layer settles in. God says, your family's future is not fragile. It may look different than you imagined. It may move slower or quieter, but it is stable. Listen to this promise carefully. God says, the shield around your family is not temporary. It is not tied to your strength. It is not tied to your presence. It is tied to my promise. Pause again. God says, what you built with love will not be undone by time. Homes change. People grow older. Roles shift. But foundations remain. This part ends here, not because the story ends, but because reassurance must come in layers. Do not rush. Do not fear. Part 2 will continue. Part 2. God says, what you fear losing is actually being secured. Stay with this part. This is for those who have reached a stage in life where fear doesn't come from ambition. It comes from love. God says, I know the kind of fear that keeps you quiet. Not fear for yourself. Fear for your family. Fear that starts with questions you never ask out loud. Will they stay united when I am not guiding them? Will they remember what truly matters? Will they be safe in a world that feels faster and colder? Listen carefully now. God says, I am protecting the bonds you cannot control anymore. Relationships grow complicated with time. Generations think differently. Voices change. But unity does not depend on agreement alone. It depends on foundation. And the foundation is already laid. Here is the unexpected truth. God says, your family's strength is no longer fragile. It is tested. They have seen hardship. They have survived storms. What survives does not collapse easily. Pause here. God says, I'm standing guard over moments you will never witness. Late night decisions. Crossroads they face alone. Choices made under pressure. They're not walking unprotected just because you're not beside them. Now, listen closely, especially if you worry about respect and values fading. God says, what you taught with consistency is louder than what the world teaches with noise. Trends will pass. Opinions will change. But character stays. Another layer unfolds. God says, I am protecting your family from slow emotional drift, from becoming distant without noticing, from turning busy into disconnected. When silence grows too heavy, Conversation will return. When distance appears, connection will follow. Stay with the suspension. God says, some conflicts you expect will resolve before becoming wounds. Not every disagreement needs scars. Not every misunderstanding needs time to heal. I step in early, quietly. Now hear this gently. God says, you do not need to hold the family together with worry. Worry is heavy. Love is steady. You have done your part by loving deeply. Another reassurance settles in. God says, your family will remember you for your presence, not your fear. For the meals, for the guidance, for the way you showed up when it mattered. Not for the nights you stayed awake worrying. Listen carefully now. God says, I am protecting your family from sudden loss of direction. Even when paths change, purpose will not disappear. They may move differently than you imagined, but they will not be lost. Pause again. God says, your role is changing, not ending. From carrier to witness, from protector to anchor. This transition is not weakness. It is wisdom. Another promise arrives here. God says, the shield around your family grows stronger when you choose peace. Peace invites clarity. Clarity invites unity. Fear blocks both. Final reassurance of this part. God says, you are not leaving your family exposed. You are leaving them covered. By love, by lessons, by my presence. This part ends here. Part 3 will continue. Before you go, comment just one word that describes your family right now. For example, faith, love, protected, united. That one word matters. Part 3, God says, I am watching over what you worry about the most. Stay with this part. This is for those who have reached an age where the heart worries quietly, not loudly. God says, I know exactly what keeps returning to your mind. Not money, not status. It is people. It is family. The ones you love but cannot control anymore. The ones who make their own choices now. The ones you pray for without telling anyone. God says, you have entered a season where love feels deeper and fear feels heavier. Because when years pass, attachment grows roots. And roots fear storms. But hear me now. Here is the twist you did not expect. God says, some of the things you fear for your family will never happen. Not because they are impossible, but because they are blocked. Quietly, firmly, without announcement. Pause here. God says, I am protecting your family from dangers they don't even recognize. Wrong advice, wrong timing, wrong people who look harmless at first. Not everything bad looks bad in the beginning. That is why my watch matters. Now listen carefully, especially if you fear family separation. God says, distance will not erase connection in your family. People may live far. Schedules may change. Voices may grow less frequent. But love does not weaken with distance. It matures. Another truth unfolds. God says, I am guarding your family's respect for one another. Disagreements will come, but dishonor will not take root. Differences will appear, but bitterness will not settle. This is not by chance. This is coverage. Stay with the suspension. God says, you may notice that problems don't escalate the way they once did. Things calm down faster. Arguments cool sooner. Understanding comes earlier. That is not luck. That is protection becoming visible. Now hear this deeply personal message. God says, you are not being replaced. You are being relieved. Relieved of carrying every outcome. Relieved of fixing every situation. Relieved of being the last wall standing. This is not loss of purpose. This is peace arriving. Another layer settles in. God says, I am protecting your family from repeating the same pains you endured. What hurt you will not define them. What broke you will not break them. Awareness has already changed the path. Pause again. God says, your prayers from years ago are still active. They did not expire. They did not weaken. Some are being answered slowly. Some are being answered silently. But none were forgotten. Listen carefully now. God says, your family will not lose direction when you slow down. They will adjust. They will grow. They will remember. The values you lived will guide them when you are quiet. Another promise rests here. God says, I am protecting your families tomorrow while you live today. You do not need to stay anxious to stay responsible. You have earned rest. This part ends here. Part 4 will continue. Before you scroll, comment one word that you want to protect in your family. For example, peace, unity, faith, health. Just one word. Part 4. God says, what you built with sacrifice will not be lost to time. Stay with this part. This is for those who look back and wonder, did my effort matter? Will anyone remember what I carried for them? God says, I have counted every silent sacrifice you made for your family. The compromises no one noticed. The dreams you postponed. The strength you showed when you were tired. Nothing disappeared into nothingness. God says, your family is standing on ground you prepared, even when they don't say it, even when they don't realize it. Stability feels normal to those who grow up in it, but it is never accidental. Here comes the family suspension. Listen closely. God says, some of the peace your family enjoys today came from storms you handled alone. They don't know how close things came to breaking. They don't know how often you stood in the gap. That does not mean it was unseen. It means it worked. Pause here. God says, I am protecting your family from forgetting where they came from. They may live differently. They may think differently, but gratitude will return, often later than you expect, but deeper than you imagine. Now hear this carefully, especially if you fear being taken for granted. God says, honor does not always arrive on time, but it does arrive. Sometimes through words, sometimes through actions, sometimes through how they raise the next generation. Seeds take time. Another truth unfolds slowly. God says, I'm guarding your family from tearing itself apart over small things. Money issues, property questions, old misunderstandings. What could have divided them will be handled with wisdom and restraint. That is not coincidence. That is intervention. Stay with the suspension. God says, you will notice fewer sharp conflicts than you feared. Conversations soften. Egos calm. Decisions slow down. This is maturity forming, not weakness. Now hear this deeply comforting message. God says, you are not becoming irrelevant. You are becoming rooted. Roots don't speak loudly. They support quietly. When storms come, everyone depends on them. Another layer settles in. God says, I am protecting your family from regret that comes too late. Unspoken appreciation will be spoken. Unfinished conversations will find their moment. Time will allow what urgency once blocked. Pause again. God says, your presence still carries authority, even when you say less. Wisdom does not need volume. Experience does not need explanation. Your calm now teaches more than your effort did before. Listen carefully now. God says, your family will not forget who kept them steady. Not in moments of reflection, not in moments of crisis, not in moments of growth. Legacy is not loud, but it lasts. Another promise rests here. God says, I am protecting what you leave behind. Your values, your name, your example. Nothing meaningful is being erased. This part ends here. Part 5 will continue. Before you go, comment one word that describes what you sacrificed most for your family. For example, time, peace, dreams, strength. Just one word. Part 5. God says, I am steadying your family for the years ahead. Stay with this part. This is for those who no longer fear today, but quietly wonder about the years to come. God says, I see the questions you don't ask anymore. Questions about health, about stability, about who will stand firm when seasons change. Those questions don't come from doubt. They come from responsibility carried for a lifetime. God says, I'm not just protecting your family from crisis. I am preparing them for continuity. Life will keep moving. Generations will keep shifting. But collapse will not be part of your story. Here is the deeper twist. Listen carefully. God says, your family will not unravel when roles change. When elders slow down. When children step forward. When leadership looks different. Transition will not bring chaos. It will bring balance. Pause here. God says, I am protecting your family during the years that feel uncertain. The in-between years. The adjustment years. The years that don't look dramatic but matter the most. Those years shape the future quietly. Now hear this carefully, especially if you worry about being a burden. God says, you will not become a weight to your family. Care will come with dignity. Support will come with respect. You are not losing value. Your value is changing form. Another truth unfolds. God says, I'm guarding your family's patience. Patience with aging. Patience with differences. Patience with change. Where impatience could grow, understanding will develop instead. Stay with the suspension. God says, some of the fears you carry about the future are memories, not prophecies. Past struggles do not define what comes next. What once went wrong will not automatically repeat. You are not reliving the past. Now hear this gentle reassurance. God says, your family will learn how to care without resentment. Care will not feel forced. Responsibility will not feel heavy. Love will lead. Another layer settles in. God says, I am protecting your family from slow emotional exhaustion, from burnout, from unspoken frustration, from carrying too much alone. Support will be shared more evenly. Pause again. God says, you are allowed to trust the years ahead, not because nothing will change, but because change will be handled. You are not stepping into uncertainty without covering. Listen carefully now. God says, your family will remain emotionally present, not just physically nearby. Visits will still carry meaning. Conversations will still matter. Time together will not feel empty. Another promise rests here. God says, I am stabilizing your family's future from the inside out, not through force, not through control, through wisdom passed down, and love still alive. This part ends here. Part 6 will continue. Before you scroll away, comment one word that represents what you want most for your family's future. For example, peace, health, unity, security. Just one word. Part 6, God says, I am quietly aligning everything you can no longer control. Stay with this part. This is for those who have learned that the heaviest worries are the ones you carry silently. God says, I see how you try to stay calm on the outside while your heart stays alert. You smile. You listen. You say it's fine. But inside, you are still watching over everyone. God says, this season is not about you holding things together. It is about things being held for you. What you can no longer manage with energy, I manage with precision. Here is the deeper shift. Listen closely. God says, I am aligning situations before they become problems. People will arrive at the right time. Conversations will happen when hearts are ready. Solutions will appear without forcing. You will notice fewer emergencies than you expected. Pause here. God says, I am protecting your family from rushed decisions, from choices made out of fear, from reactions made under pressure. Slowness will bring clarity. Clarity will prevent regret. Now hear this carefully, especially if you fear being misunderstood. God says, your family understands you more than you think, even when they don't say it, even when they express it differently. Respect does not always show itself immediately. Sometimes it grows quietly with age. Another truth unfolds. God says, I am guarding your family from emotional coldness. They will not become distant strangers. They will not lose warmth with time. Even if words become fewer, care will remain strong. Stay with the suspension. God says, some of the protection around your family will look like delay. Plans slowing down. Outcomes taking longer. Do not mistake delay for denial. Timing is part of safety. Now hear this gentle but powerful reassurance. God says, you do not need to remind your family how much you've done. Your life has already spoken. Your consistency has already taught. Explanation is not required where example exists. Another layer settles in. God says, I'm protecting your family from unnecessary guilt. Guilt about not doing enough. Guilt about not being perfect. Guilt passed from one generation to the next. Release will replace blame. Pause again. God says, you're allowed to enjoy this phase of life without constantly preparing for loss, without expecting something to go wrong. Enjoyment is not carelessness. It is trust matured. Listen carefully now. God says, your family's future is not unstable. It is adjusting. Adjustment feels uncomfortable, but it leads to balance. Nothing essential is being removed. Another promise rests here. God says, I am protecting your family from the inside, where fear cannot reach. Thoughts will calm. Hearts will steady. Homes will feel lighter. This protection does not fade with time. This part ends here. Part 7 will continue. Before you pause, comment one word that describes what you want to release from your heart. For example, fear, worry, guilt, control. Just one word. Part 7, God says, you can rest now. I am standing watch. Stay with this part. This one is for those who have spent most of their life being alert. Even while resting, your mind stayed awake. Even while sitting quietly, your heart kept checking on everyone. God says, I know how long you have stayed in protection mode. Not because anyone asked you to, but because love trained you to. God says, there was a time when your vigilance was necessary. You had to be strong. You had to anticipate problems. You had to think ahead for everyone. That season shaped your family. But hear this carefully now. Here is the shift that brings deep relief. God says, you are no longer the first line of defense. Not because you failed, but because you succeeded. What needed to be built has already been built. Pause here. God says, I am protecting your family during the hours you sleep. Nothing goes unattended. Nothing slips through, even when your body rests. Coverage remains active. Now, listen closely, especially if nights feel heavy. God says, the thoughts that visit you late at night are not warnings. They are old habits of responsibility, not signals of danger. You learn to worry as a form of love. Now, love is learning peace. Another truth unfolds slowly. God says, I am guarding your family from sudden shocks, from news that arrives too fast, from situations that overwhelm. What comes will come gently, with preparation and support. Stay with the suspension. God says, you will notice fewer moments that demand immediate reaction. Life will slow in the right places. Urgency will reduce. This calm is intentional. Now hear this deeply comforting message. God says, your family does not need constant supervision to stay safe. They have learned. They have matured. They have internalized what you modeled. What lives inside them cannot be stolen. Another layer settles in. God says, I am protecting your family from fear of the unknown. They may not have every answer, but panic will not rule their choices. Confidence will replace anxiety. Pause again. God says, you are allowed to put your guard down without guilt. Putting your guard down does not mean putting your family at risk. It means trusting what has already been secured. Listen carefully now. God says, your family story is not heading toward loss. It is heading toward stability. Not dramatic success, not loud celebration, but something stronger. Continuity. Another promise rests here. God says, I am protecting your family from drifting apart emotionally. Even if routines change, even if roles evolve, care will remain familiar. Let this sink in fully. God says, you have reached a season where peace is deserved. You earned it through years of showing up, through endurance, through quiet strength. This peace is not fragile. This part ends here. Part 8 will continue. Before you move on, comment one word that describes how your heart feels right now. For example, calm, relieved, hopeful, tired. Just one word. Part 8. God says, what comes next will not overwhelm you or your family. Stay with this part. This is for those who have reached a stage in life where the future doesn't scare you loudly. It weighs quietly. God says, I know you don't fear tomorrow for yourself. You fear it for your family, for their strength, for their unity, for how they will face life when things change again. Listen slowly now. God says, the next chapter of your family's life will arrive gently, not suddenly, not harshly, not with chaos. It will unfold in steps, with space to breathe. Here is the truth many elders need to hear. God says, you will not be shocked by what is coming. Nothing will drop without warning. Nothing will arrive without preparation. I am softening transitions before they touch your home. Pause here. God says, I am protecting your family from emotional overload. Too much responsibility at once. Too many changes together. Too much pressure without support. What comes will be manageable. Now listen carefully, especially if you worry about health and strength. God says, you will be given grace for each season you enter. Strength will adjust. Energy will shift. But you will not be left helpless. Help will rise when needed. Another layer unfolds. God says, I am guarding your family from fear-based decisions. No rusing. No panic. No acting out of desperation. Wisdom will lead conversations. Calm will guide choices. Stay with the suspension. God says, you may notice that even difficult news feels lighter than expected, because it will arrive with solutions nearby, with people ready, with clarity already forming. Now hear this deeply reassuring message. God says, your family will not fall apart under responsibility. They will share it. They will grow into it. No one will be crushed by expectation. Another truth settles in. God says, I am protecting your family from long-term emotional damage. Temporary stress will not become permanent strain. Challenges will not turn into bitterness. Healing will follow hardship naturally. Pause again. God says, you do not need to rehearse worst-case scenarios anymore. That habit once kept everyone safe. Now it only steals peace. Peace is no longer risky. Listen carefully now. God says, your family's future does not depend on perfect planning. It depends on adaptability, on love, on shared effort. All of that already exists. Another promise rests here. God says, I am protecting the emotional climate of your home. Voices will stay respectful. Silences will not be cold. Differences will not become divisions. Let this land gently. God says, what is coming will feel like continuation, not collapse. Life will move forward, but not away from what matters. This part ends here. Part 9 will continue. Before you rest, comment one word that describes what you want the coming years to feel like. For example, peace, stability, dignity, togetherness. Just one word. Part 9. God says, nothing important will slip through your hands. Stay with this part. This one is for those who quietly fear losing grip. Not on things, but on people. God says, I know you sometimes wonder if time is moving faster than your ability to hold everything together. Names, faces, routines. Family gatherings that feel shorter. Moments that pass before you're ready. Listen carefully now. God says, you are not losing control. You are entering trust. There's a difference. Control clenches. Trust steadies. And steadiness lasts longer. Here is the truth that settles many old hearts. God says, nothing essential in your family will be lost due to time. Not connection. Not love. Not meaning. What matters most is anchored deeper than memory. Pause here. God says, I am protecting your family from quiet drifting. The kind where people live near each other, but feel far. Conversations will return. Check-ins will happen naturally. Care will resurface when it's needed most. Now listen closely, especially if you fear being forgotten. God says, your place in your family is permanent. Not because of authority, not because of obligation, but because of history, because of presence, because of love invested over years. That cannot be erased. Another truth unfolds gently. God says, I am guarding your family from emotional neglect. No one will be left unseen for too long. No one will carry pain alone indefinitely. When someone withdraws, someone else will notice. Stay with the suspension. God says, moments of distance will not become permanent separation. Life gets busy. Voices get quieter. But roots pull people back. Now hear this deeply comforting message. God says, you will not miss what truly matters. Important conversations will find their time. Important goodbyes will not be rushed. Important love will not go unexpressed. Timing will meet meaning. Another layer settles in. God says, I am protecting your family from regret that comes too late. Opportunities to speak. Chances to reconnect. Moments to forgive. They will arrive while hearts are still open. Pause again. God says, you are allowed to stop checking on everything. You don't need to mentally review every detail. You don't need to anticipate every problem. What requires your attention will come to you gently. Listen carefully now. God says, your family's emotional bonds are stronger than daily contact. Love is not measured in frequency. It is measured in depth. Depth has already been built. Another promise rests here. God says, I am protecting what you fear forgetting and what fears forgetting you. Names will stay familiar. Faces will remain dear. Belonging will not fade. Let this settle fully. God says, What truly matters is being preserved beyond your effort. You don't have to hold it all. You never did, alone. This part ends here. Part 10 will continue. Before you pause, comment one word that represents what you never want to lose in your family. For example, love, respect, closeness, faith. Just one word. Part 10. God says, I am preserving what time cannot take from you. Stay with this part. This is for those who have started noticing how quickly years pass and quietly ask themselves, what will remain? God says, I know you watch time more carefully now, not with fear, with awareness. You notice changes others ignore. You value moments others rush through. That awareness is not sadness. It is wisdom. God says, what truly defines your family is not fragile. Schedules change. Faces age. Routines evolve. But essence does not disappear with time. Here is the truth meant to steady you. God says, I am preserving the spirit of your family, not just its structure. Love that feels familiar. Respect that feels natural. Care that doesn't need explanation. These things are protected beyond calendars and clocks. Pause here. God says, I am guarding your family from becoming strangers to one another. Even if years pass quickly, even if meetings become fewer, recognition will remain. Warmth will return easily. That is not accidental. That is rooted. Now listen carefully, especially if you fear fading influence. God says, your influence has already moved from instruction to imprint. Imprints don't fade easily. They surface in choices, in values, in how the next generation treats one another. You are present in ways you cannot always see. Another layer unfolds slowly. God says, I am protecting your family from forgetting shared history. Stories will resurface. Memories will be retold. Lessons will be repeated, sometimes in new words. History keeps families grounded. Stay with the suspension. God says, you will notice moments when your family pauses and remembers, not because they are told to, but because something inside them pulls them back. That pull is connection. Now hear this deeply reassuring message. God says, you are not racing against time. Time is not chasing you. Time is carrying you forward. What needs to stay will stay. Another truth settles in. God says, I am protecting your family from emotional erosion. Small misunderstandings will not pile up. Unspoken feelings will find safe moments. Erosion takes neglect, and neglect will not dominate your home. Pause again. God says, you do not need to fear becoming invisible. Presence is not volume. It is significance. You have already established significance. Listen carefully now. God says, your family will continue to feel like home to one another. Not perfect, not without flaws, but safe, recognizable, grounded. Another promise rests here. God says, I am preserving the emotional language of your family. How you comfort, how you disagree, how you forgive. These patterns will survive time. Let this settle fully. God says, what matters most has already been secured. You are not late. You are not behind. You are right where preservation begins. This part ends here. Part 11 will continue. Before you move on, comment one word that describes what home truly means to you. For example, safety, belonging, warmth, peace. Just one word. Part 11. God says, your family will remain grounded, even as life moves forward. Stay with this part. This one is for those who watch the world change quickly and quietly ask, will my family stay steady in all this? God says, I see how different the world feels compared to when you began. Values shift. Priorities blur. Life moves faster than it used to. And yet, you stayed rooted. God says, your family will not lose its center, even when opinions differ, even when generations see things differently. The core will remain intact, because what was built with sincerity does not collapse under change. Here is the truth that brings calm to aging hearts. God says, your family does not need to resist change to stay strong. Flexibility will not weaken them. Adaptation will not erase values. They will move forward without abandoning what matters. Pause here. God says, I am protecting your family from confusion about identity. They will know who they are. They will know where they belong. Even if paths look different, Belonging will stay clear. Now listen carefully, especially if you worry about influence. God says, what you live will guide them more than what you explained. Your patience, your restraint, your consistency, those lessons travel further than words. Another layer unfolds gently. God says, I am guarding your family from losing respect across generations. Elders will not feel dismissed. Younger ones will not feel unheard. Understanding will grow both ways. This balance is protected. Stay with the suspension. God says, you may notice moments when your family chooses calm over conflict, not because they avoid truth, but because they value peace. That choice is maturity showing itself. Now hear this deeply reassuring message. God says, your family will remain emotionally anchored, not scattered. Busy lives will not break connection. Different routines will not erase care. Anchors hold even when waters move. Another truth settles in. God says, I am protecting your family from chasing what does not serve them. They will pause before copying the world. They will think before following noise. Discernment will guide them quietly. Pause again. God says, you do not need to correct everything to stay relevant. Your calm presence already teaches balance. Your listening already creates space. Sometimes guidance works best without instruction. Listen carefully now. God says, your family's foundation is deeper than trends, opinions, or pressure. It was built on effort, on showing up, on shared endurance. Depth resists erosion. Another promise rests here. God says, I'm keeping your family emotionally centered. When stress increases outside, calm will live inside. Your home, wherever it is, will remain a place of grounding. Let this settle fully. God says, what you fear losing has already been stabilized. Not frozen, not fragile, but steady. This part ends here. Part 12 will continue. Before you pause, comment one word that describes what keeps your family grounded. For example, values, love, faith, respect. Just one word. Part 12, God says, what holds your family together will grow stronger with time. Stay with this part. This is for those who have seen seasons change again and again, and quietly ask, will closeness survive the years? God says, I know you've watched bonds stretch and wondered if they would thin. Distance, responsibilities, life pulling everyone in different directions. Yet here you are, still connected. God says, your family's unity is not dependent on constant togetherness. It is built on understanding, on forgiveness practiced early, on love that learned how to bend without breaking. That kind of unity matures, it doesn't weaken. Here is the truth that settles deep. God says, I'm strengthening the invisible threads between you. Threads of trust, threads of shared history, threads of mutual care. You may not always see them, but they're holding more than you realize. Pause here. God says, I am protecting your family from the slow drift that comes with unspoken tension. Conversations will happen. Feelings will surface gently. Misunderstandings will be addressed before they harden. Silence will not become distance. Now listen carefully, especially if you fear growing apart. God says, closeness will return in cycles. Some years feel busy. Some years feel distant. But reconnection will always find its way back. That rhythm is natural and safe. Another layer unfolds. God says, I am guarding your family from unresolved resentment. Old hurts will soften. Sharp memories will lose their edge. Healing does not always arrive dramatically. Sometimes it arrives quietly through time. Stay with the suspension. God says, you will notice moments when your family chooses each other again. Choosing patience, choosing conversation, choosing presence. Those choices matter more than perfection. Now hear this deeply reassuring message. God says, your family will not become emotionally distant strangers. Familiarity will remain. Care will resurface easily. Even after time apart, love will feel recognizable. Another truth settles in. God says, I am protecting your family from cold formality. Relationships will not turn stiff or forced. Warmth will remain natural. Laughter will still return, sometimes unexpectedly. Pause again. God says, You do not need to hold everyone together by effort anymore. Connection will come from willingness, not obligation. That is a healthier bond. Listen carefully now. God says, what keeps your family together is no longer fragile. It has been tested. It has adapted. It has endured. Endurance creates stability. Another promise rests here. God says, I am increasing your family's emotional resilience. Challenges will come, but recovery will be quicker. Understanding will come sooner. Peace will return faster. Let this settle fully. God says, your family's togetherness will age well, like something well cared for, like something meaningful, not loud, not perfect, but lasting. This part ends here. Part 13 will continue. Before you go, comment one word that describes what keeps you emotionally connected to your family. For example, memories, care, commitment, love. Just one word. Part 13. God says, the quiet blessings around your family are about to become noticeable. Stay with this part. This one is for those who feel life has become ordinary and secretly wonder if that means something important is missing. God says, I know you don't ask for miracles anymore. You ask for normal days, for calm mornings, for everyone to come home safely. That desire is not small. It is mature faith. God says, I am working in the spaces you no longer look at, in routines, in habits, in the simple way your family keeps going. The miracle is not loud. It is consistent. Here is the shift that brings gentle surprise. God says, you are about to notice how protected you already are, not because danger increases, but because awareness deepens. You will see how many things didn't go wrong, how many moments passed safely. Pause here. God says, I am protecting your family through stability. Bills handled, health maintained, problems resolved before becoming crises. Stability is not boring. It is mercy in motion. Now listen carefully, especially if you feel overlooked. God says, your family's blessings are not delayed. They are layered, layer upon layer of provision, layer upon layer of care. When one layer feels thin, another is already supporting it. Another truth unfolds quietly. God says, I am guarding your family from unnecessary drama. Arguments that could escalate won't. Misunderstandings that could linger won't. Peace will step in before tension settles. Stay with the suspension. God says, you will begin to recognize protection in hindsight, looking back and realizing, that could have gone worse. That turned out better than expected. Those moments are not coincidences. Now hear this deeply reassuring message. God says, your family is being spared from burdens you never had to carry. Troubles that passed by, paths you didn't take, outcomes that softened. You were redirected more times than you know. Another layer settles in. God says, I am protecting your family's peace from being stolen by comparison. What others have, or show, will not disturb your contentment. You will value what fits your life, not what impresses the world. Pause again. God says, you are allowed to appreciate the calm. Calm does not mean stagnation. It means alignment. Not every blessing needs excitement to be real. Listen carefully now. God says, your family's protection is active even on quiet days, even when nothing dramatic happens, even when nothing changes. Especially then, another promise rests here. God says, I'm teaching your family to recognize safety as a gift, not as entitlement, not as accident, but as care received daily. Let this settle fully. God says, what you are living right now is the answer to prayers you once whispered, and more answers are already forming. Gently, patiently. This part ends here. Part 14 will continue. Before you scroll, comment one word that describes what you feel grateful for today. For example, calm, health, home, family. Just one word.